Your wife has removed you from all joint accounts and filed for divorce, the email read. I stared at my dusty laptop screen. The desert heat suddenly forgotten as ice filled my veins. 3 months into my 4th deployment to Afghanistan, and Sarah was leaving me, not just leaving me, but apparently taking everything while I was 7,000 miles away, defending my country. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Captain Michael Bennett, 34 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I had a stable marriage waiting for me back in Fort Carson, Colorado. I read the email from my friend Jake 3 more times, each reading more painful than the last. Sarah had withdrawn $43,000 from our savings, removed my name from the deed to our house, and filed divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. The house we'd bought together after my 2nd tour, the house where we'd talked about starting a family when I finally completed my service commitment. The cramped barracks suddenly felt even smaller. Outside, the Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on the base, but I couldn't feel anything except numbness. 12 years in the army, 4 deployments as a logistics officer, and somehow this hit harder than any combat situation I'd faced. Bennett, you okay? Staff Sergeant Rodriguez asked, poking his head into my quarters. You look like you've seen a ghost. I minimized the email. Fine, just some news from home. Rodriguez knew better than to push. In our unit, we respected the invisible. Line between combat solidarity and personal problems. He nodded and backed away, but not before saying, If you need anything, sir, you know where to find me. After he left, I reopened the email and scrolled down to the part that confused me most. Don't worry about responding yet. James says he's got this handled. James Thompson was my lawyer back home, an old college friend who'd helped us with the house purchase and had drawn up our wills before my first deployment. What did Jake mean that James had this handled? I hadn't even told James about any marriage problems. The truth was, Sarah and I had been struggling before this deployment. She'd grown increasingly distant during my 3rd tour, frustrated with the military life, the constant moves, the long separations. When I got orders for Afghanistan again, she'd barely reacted, just nodded and continued scrolling through her phone. But divorce, taking the house, emptying our accounts, this was several steps beyond distant. I tried calling Jake, but satellite. Phone connections were spotty at best. All I got was his voicemail. Hey, it's Jake. Leave a message or text like a normal person. Despite everything, that made me smile briefly. Jake had been giving me grief about my old man phone habits since college. Instead, I composed an email to James. My hands hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed, James, Jake mentioned you're handling something with Sarah. What's going on? She's leaving me, taking the house. I'm completely in the dark here. The reply came faster than I'd expected, just 4 hours later, as I was finishing my shift overseeing supply movements. Michael, I was waiting to contact you until I had all the facts straight. Yes, Sarah has filed for divorce and attempted to transfer ownership of the house solely to herself. She claimed you had verbally agreed to this arrangement before deployment. However, you might recall that before you left, I had you sign some additional paperwork. Remember the deployment contingency documents? Those are proving very useful right now. I've already filed an injunction on the house transfer and frozen the remaining joint assets. Call me when you can, but please know this. She won't get away with this. Trust me, I've been planning for this possibility since I saw the signs last year. Last year? The deployment contingency documents. I vaguely remembered James insisting on some additional paperwork before I left, but with pre-deployment preparations. In full swing, I'd trusted my old friend and signed where indicated. What had he seen that I hadn't? That night, I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Sarah over the past year. There had been signs, now that I looked back with clearer eyes. The password changes on our accounts that she claimed were for security. Her sudden interest in our property deed, after years of leaving financial matters to me. The way she'd suggested I remove her as my life insurance beneficiary in case something happens to me first, replacing herself with my sister instead. I'd been blind, choosing to see a stressed military spouse rather than someone methodically preparing an exit. The realization hurt worse than the divorce itself. 2 days later, I finally connected with James by phone. The connection was terrible, his voice cutting in and out, but I heard enough. Prenup you insisted on. Protects the house since you made. Down payment from your grandfather's inheritance. Documented the $43,000 withdrawal. Judge already ordered. Frozen her accounts too. Army's JAG office involved since she timed this during active deployment. Protection laws. How did you know? I finally managed to ask during a break in his legal explanation. How did you know she was planning this? The line crackled before James answered. Remember when I helped update your will last year? Sarah asked me some hypothetical questions afterward about military pensions, property rights during deployment, Colorado divorce laws. Red flags, Mike, big ones. I've seen military spouses do this before. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? You've been in love with her since college. I needed evidence, not suspicions. So I prepared. Instead, the line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in the communications tent, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the connection failed. Around me, life on the base continued. Soldiers moving supplies, checking weapons, preparing for patrols. My personal life was imploding, but the mission continued. Captain Lewis approached, concern evident on his face. Everything all right, Bennett? No, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. But it will be. I threw myself into work over the next 2 weeks. Logistics challenges provided a welcome distraction from the slow-motion collapse of my marriage. Every spare moment was spent documenting my financial contributions to our relationship for James, bank statements showing my military paycheck deposits, records of the inheritance I'd put toward our house down payment, evidence that I'd supported Sarah through her. 3 unfinished degree programs over the years. Email by email, I pieced together the story. Sarah had apparently begun seeing someone new, a real estate agent she'd met at a gym last year. Together, they'd planned to time the divorce filing with my deployment, assuming I'd be too distant and distracted to fight back effectively. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd already moved him into our house, according to neighbors who'd emailed me their concerns. Don't worry about the house, James wrote. The judge was not impressed with Sarah's timing, attempting this while you're in active deployment. The Service Members Civil Relief Act gives us solid footing. Also remember, I insisted you keep your inheritance money documented separately. That's proving crucial now. I remembered. James had always been cautious that way, encouraging me to maintain clear records even when it seemed overly suspicious. Marriage is both a relationship and a business arrangement, he'd said years ago while drawing up our prenup. Sarah had been insulted by his frankness, but had signed nonetheless. 1 month into the divorce proceedings, I received another email from James with a single line, "You might want to see this." Attached was a social media screenshot, Sarah and her new boyfriend Todd standing in front of our house with a "sold" sign, champagne glasses raised in celebration. The post was dated 2 weeks before she'd even filed for divorce. The image should have devastated me. Instead, it hardened something inside. This wasn't just opportunistic, it was calculated, planned, while I was serving my country. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez found me staring at the image in the mess hall. Without asking, he sat down across from me. "Bad news?" I turned my tablet to show him. He studied it, jaw tightening. My ex-wife did something similar during my second tour in Iraq. Not the house, but wiped out our accounts. Military spouses, man. They're either stronger than steel or they can't handle it, no in between. How'd you get through it? I asked. Day by day. Then I met Elena. 5 years and 2 kids later, I thank God every day my ex left. He pulled out his phone to show me pictures of his family. A smiling woman with 2 young boys, all wearing Colorado Rockies jerseys. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best. His words stayed with me that night as I composed an email to Sarah, the first direct communication since learning of her betrayal. Sarah, I won't pretend to understand why you've chosen this path or why you felt it necessary to do this while I'm deployed. You could have waited, told me to my face that our marriage was over. Instead, you've made choices that reflect on your character, not mine. I've instructed James to proceed with the divorce. You won't get the house, the paperwork and prenup are clear. You'll return the $43,000 you took from our joint savings, as the judge has already ordered. After that, we never need to speak again. I deserve better than what you've done, and someday I'll find it. I didn't expect a reply, but one came the next morning. You were never here, Michael. 4 deployments in 12 years. I spent more time with your family photos than with you. Todd is present. Todd is here. Keep your precious house and money. I've already moved on. Her words stung because they carried a kernel of truth. I had been absent, though not by choice. The military life she'd once claimed to understand had become the wedge between us, but that didn't justify theft and deception. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings continued from afar, with James sending regular updates. Sarah fought the judge's orders until her lawyer apparently explained the futility of her position and the potential for criminal charges related to the attempted property transfer. She returned the money in installments, each one accompanied by an email filled with recriminations. My deployment was extended by 2 months due to regional instability. In some ways, I was grateful for the distance from the divorce drama back home. My unit had become a surrogate family, especially Rodriguez and Lewis, who made sure I wasn't alone with my thoughts too often. Then came the email that changed everything again. Michael, I've received an interesting offer from Sarah's attorney, James wrote. She wants to drop all claims to your military pension and future benefits in exchange for keeping the furniture and her car. She's also offering to cover her own legal fees if we can expedite the process. From a negotiation standpoint, this is a major concession from her initial position. Typically, spouses are entitled to a portion of military pension based on the marriage duration. Her willingness to walk away from this suggests something has changed. I recommend we accept before she reconsiders. I wrote back immediately. What's changed? This feels like a trap. James's response came the next day. I did some digging. Apparently, Todd's real estate business is struggling with some licensing issues. 3 complaints have been filed with the Colorado Real Estate Commission, alleging ethical violations. Sarah seems eager to finalize things and move to Arizona with him. My theory? Todd's professional problems are accelerating their plans, and she wants out cleanly before his situation potentially affects her. I laughed out loud in the middle of the command center, earning strange looks from 2 junior officers nearby. The karma was almost too perfect. Sarah had chosen a man who was as dishonest in business as she had been in our marriage. Accept the offer, I wrote back. Let her go with the furniture. I'll buy new. 2 weeks before my delayed return to the States, James sent confirmation that the divorce was finalized. Sarah had indeed walked away with only personal belongings and her car, relinquishing all claims to the house, my military benefits, and my future pension. According to James, she and Todd had already relocated to Phoenix, where he claimed to have better business opportunities. The day I finally flew back to Colorado Springs Airport, a small, welcoming committee awaited me, my sister Kate with her husband, James with his wife Emma, and Jake with a sign reading, "Freedom on all fronts," in giant letters that earned disapproving looks from more conservative military families reuniting nearby. Kate hugged me first, whispering, "The house is all set up." We cleared out all her stuff, repainted, new furniture, fresh start. James shook my hand, then pulled me into an unexpected hug. "Told you I had it handled." "How can I ever thank you?" I asked him. "You already did, by making me executor of your grandfather's trust when we were in law school. I've been looking out for your interest for 15 years, Mike. Not about to stop now." That evening, they took me to my house alone now, in the quiet Colorado Springs neighborhood Sarah and I had chosen for its good schools and proximity to base. Kate hadn't exaggerated about the transformation. Every trace of Sarah was gone, replaced by new furniture, fresh paint in colors I would have chosen, and a fully stocked refrigerator. "We set up the spare bedroom as a home office," Jake explained, showing me the room that had once been designated as a future nursery. "Figured you might want to start thinking about what comes after the army." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on my new couch in my reclaimed house, surrounded by the tangible support of people who truly cared for me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. 14 years with Sarah, gone. The future we'd planned, erased. I pulled out my phone and found myself looking at old photos of us in happier times. Sarah cheering at my promotion ceremony, both of us hiking in the Rockies, her smile at our wedding. Had it all been a lie? Or had we simply grown in different directions until we became unrecognizable to each other? I was still scrolling when a text from James arrived. "Stop looking at old pictures and get some sleep. Tomorrow we're taking you to Murphy's to celebrate your return and your freedom. No wallowing allowed." I smiled, put the phone away, and, for the first time since that first devastating email in Afghanistan, I felt something like hope. 6 months later, I was settled into a new rhythm. The Army had assigned me to Fort Carson's Logistics Training Division, a position that wouldn't require deployment for at least 2 years. I'd started taking night classes toward an MBA, thinking about my eventual transition to civilian life. The house had truly become mine, with a new deck I'd built myself and a garage workshop where I spent weekends restoring a vintage motorcycle. News of Sarah occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances. Todd's real estate license had indeed been suspended in Arizona, just as it had been in Colorado. They'd moved again, this time to Nevada. She'd reached out to Kate once, asking if I'd consider selling her some specific furniture pieces I'd kept. Kate had declined on my behalf. On a warm Saturday in September, I was pressure washing the driveway when a car I didn't recognize pulled up across the street. I paid little attention until I heard a familiar voice. "The place looks good." Sarah stood at the edge of my driveway, looking both the same and somehow different. Her hair was shorter, highlighted blonde instead of her natural brown. She wore an expensive-looking summer dress and oversized sunglasses. I turned off the pressure washer. "What are you doing here?" "I was in town visiting my parents." She gestured vaguely toward the other side of the city. "Thought I'd drive by. See the old place." "It's not your place anymore," I said, surprise giving way to a dull anger. "You made that choice." "I know." She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that looked tired despite her carefully applied makeup. Things with Todd didn't work out the way I expected. I said nothing, waiting. Part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, wanted to hear that her grand betrayal had led to disappointment. His business problems were worse than he let on. she continued when I didn't respond. We're not together anymore. I'm staying with my parents while I figure things out. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want Sarah to suffer. I just wanted her out of my life. I've been thinking a lot about us, Michael, about what happened. I made a terrible mistake. And there it was, the moment I'd both imagined and dreaded during dark nights in Afghanistan. Sarah, regretful and returning. Once, I would have given anything to hear those words. Sarah, I said carefully, whatever you're about to suggest, the answer is no, we're divorced, it's done. You don't even know what I was going to say, she protested, taking a step closer. I don't need to know. You betrayed me in the worst possible way, at the worst possible time. You tried to take everything while I was serving my country thousands of miles away. I gestured to the house behind me. Whatever we had is gone. I've moved on. Have you? She glanced toward the house. Are you seeing someone new? The question irritated me more than it should have. That's not your business anymore. She looked down at her designer sandals, now dusty from my driveway. I still have my key, you know. I could have just gone inside while you were deployed, taken whatever I wanted. The fact that I tried to do it legally should count for something. I stared at her, incredulous. You're not serious. Of course I'm not serious about the key. I gave it to Todd months ago. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was a joke, not a funny one. The uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant sound of neighborhood children playing down the street. Your lawyer? She finally said. James. He was ready for everything, wasn't he? Every motion I filed, every claim I made, he had counters prepared before I even made my moves. How did he know? I thought about James's red flags, his quiet preparation, his protective measures put in place months before Sarah made her move. He pays attention, something you and I both stopped doing in our marriage. She nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Michael, not just because things didn't work out with Todd, but because of how I handled everything with us. Part of me wanted to lash out, to detail exactly how her actions had affected me during an already stressful deployment, how I'd lain awake nights wondering what signs I'd missed in our marriage, how squad mates had covered for me when my distraction could have been dangerous. Instead, I simply said, I accept your apology, Sarah, and I wish you well, but this conversation is over. I turned back to my pressure washer, my posture making it clear I considered the matter closed. I heard her sigh, followed by the click of her sandals on the pavement as she returned to her car. As she drove away, I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just relief that another chapter had truly closed. That evening, I texted James. Sarah came by today. Apparently, she and Todd are done. She seemed to be testing the waters about reconciliation. His response was immediate. Please tell me you showed her the driveway exit. I did, but I've been thinking about something she said. She asked how you were so prepared, how you anticipated her every move. James's reply took longer this time. Risk management is my job, Mike. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Sarah showed me who she was during that will preparation. Someone who saw your marriage as a transaction rather than a partnership. I simply made sure you were protected. I set down my phone, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a bourbon. My grandfather's favorite, a bottle James had brought as a divorce-finalized gift months earlier. On my refrigerator hung a save-the-date magnet for Rodriguez's vow renewal ceremony next spring. On my counter sat an MBA course catalogue, highlighted with potential specializations. On my coffee table, brochures for civilian logistics positions. I was considering for after my service commitment ended. Sarah had tried to take my house, my savings, my stability, but in the process, She'd given me something unexpected, a fresh start, a clearer vision, and a deeper appreciation for the people who truly had my back. I raised my glass to the empty room. To James Thompson, I said aloud, the friend who saw the storm coming and built me an ark while I was staring at blue skies. 1 year to the day after finalizing my divorce, I stood in the backyard of my house, truly my house now in every sense, surrounded by friends at what Jake insisted on calling my Independence Day cookout. Rodriguez and his family were there, his boys playing catch in the yard. Kate and her husband manned the grill. James and Emma brought a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne. As sunset painted the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and purples, with Pikes Peak silhouetted in the distance, James raised his glass. To Michael Bennett, he said, who served his country with honor, faced betrayal with dignity, and built himself a new life with courage, and who, thankfully, always signs paperwork without reading the fine print when his lawyer friend tells him to. Everyone laughed, even me, especially me. And to good friends, I added, raising my own glass in return, who plan ahead for the storms they see coming, even when we're looking the other way. Later, as guests began to depart, I found myself alone with James on the new deck. I never properly thanked you, I said, not just for the legal work, but for seeing what I couldn't or wouldn't see. James looked out at the mountains. You know what the hardest part was? Watching you deploy, knowing what she might be planning, but having no concrete proof. I couldn't warn you, based on just suspicion, and risk making your deployment even more stressful if I was wrong. So instead, you built a legal fortress around me. That's what friends do, he said simply. They protect each other's blind spots. As I looked around at my reclaimed life, the house I'd kept, the career I was building, the true friends who'd stood by me, I realized Sarah had been wrong in her final accusation. My absence during deployments wasn't what had killed our marriage. It was the absence of loyalty, of honesty, of true partnership. In the military, we have a saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst, and always know where your exits are. Thanks to James, I'd had an exit strategy I never knew I needed. And now, standing in a yard filled with laughter and authentic connections, I finally understood. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you actually deserve. That night, I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Sarah over the past year. There had been signs, now that I looked back with clearer eyes. The password changes on our accounts that she claimed were for security. Her sudden interest in our property deed, after years of leaving financial matters to me. The way she'd suggested I remove her as my life insurance beneficiary in case something happens to me first, replacing herself with my sister instead. I'd been blind, choosing to see a stressed military spouse rather than someone methodically preparing an exit. The realization hurt worse than the divorce itself. 2 days later, I finally connected with James by phone. The connection was terrible, his voice cutting in and out, but I heard enough. Prenup you insisted on. Protects the house since you made. Down payment from your grandfather's inheritance. Documented the $43,000 withdrawal. Judge already ordered. Frozen her accounts too. Army's JAG office involved, since she timed this during active deployment. Protection laws. How did you know? I finally managed to ask during a break in his legal explanation. How did you know she was planning this? The line crackled before James answered. Remember when I helped update your will last year? Sarah asked me some hypothetical questions afterward. About military pensions, property rights during deployment, Colorado divorce laws, red flags, Mike, big ones. I've seen military spouses do this before. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? You've been in love with her since college. I needed evidence, not suspicions. So I prepared. Instead, the line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in the communications tent, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the connection failed. Around me, life on the base continued, soldiers moving supplies, checking weapons, preparing for patrols. My personal life was imploding, but the mission continued. Captain Lewis approached, concern evident on his face. "Everything all right, Bennett?" "No," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty, "but it will be." I threw myself into work over the next 2 weeks. Logistics challenges provided a welcome distraction from the slow-motion collapse of my marriage. Every spare moment was spent documenting my financial contributions to our relationship for James, bank statements showing my military paycheck deposits, records of the inheritance I'd put toward our house down payment, evidence that I'd supported Sarah through her 3 unfinished degree programs over the years. Email by email, I pieced together the story. Sarah had apparently begun seeing someone new, a real estate agent she'd met at a gym last year. Together, they'd planned to time the divorce filing with my deployment, assuming I'd be too distant and distracted to fight back effectively. She'd already moved him into our house, according to neighbors who'd emailed me their concerns. My stomach turned at the thought of another man sleeping in our bed, using our shower, lounging on our couch, all while I was sleeping on a cot in a desert halfway around the world. The images haunted me during quiet moments between missions, poisoning memories of what I'd thought was a loving, if sometimes strained, marriage. "Don't worry about the house," James wrote. "The judge was not impressed with Sarah's timing, attempting this while you're in active deployment. The Service Members Civil Relief Act gives us solid footing. Also, remember I insisted you keep your inheritance money documented separately. That's proving crucial now." I remembered. James had always been cautious that way, encouraging me to maintain clear records, even when it seemed overly suspicious. "Marriage is both a relationship and a business arrangement," he'd said years ago while drawing up our prenup. Sarah had been insulted by his frankness, but had signed nonetheless. One morning, as I was overseeing the loading of supply trucks, Sergeant Miller approached with a tablet in hand. "Sir, you've got an urgent message from home." My heart raced as I took the device, fearing bad news about the divorce proceedings. Instead, I found a message from my sister Kate. "Michael, I thought you should know what's happening here before you hear it from someone else. Sarah hosted a housewarming party last weekend, at your house, with her new boyfriend. When I confronted her, she claimed you'd agreed to let her have the property and were just playing games through your lawyer. She had the nerve to say you were being spiteful. I took pictures of everything: the party, the new furniture she's bought, the renovations she's starting. James says this will help our case. Stay strong, big brother." Attached were several photos, Sarah laughing with a tall, tanned man with a too-white smile, presumably Todd, the real estate agent. Friends I recognized from our social circle, mingling in our living room, which now featured furniture I'd never seen. A "sold" sign mockingly propped against our front door as a party decoration. The betrayal burned fresh. These weren't strangers Sarah was flaunting her new relationship to. These were our mutual friends, people who had attended our wedding, who had sent me care packages during previous deployments, people who should have known better. I forwarded the email to James with a single question: "Can we use this?" His reply came within the hour. "Already on it. This demonstrates her disregard for the court's temporary orders regarding the property. Her celebration may be premature." 1 month into the divorce proceedings, I received another email from James with a single line: "You might want to see this." Attached was a social media screenshot, Sarah and Todd standing in front of our house with that same "sold" sign, champagne glasses raised in celebration. The post was dated 2 weeks before she'd even filed for divorce. The image should have devastated me. Instead, it hardened something inside. This wasn't just opportunistic. It was calculated, planned while I was serving my country. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez found me staring at the image in the mess hall. Without asking, he sat down across from me. Bad news? I turned my tablet to show him. He studied it, jaw tightening. My ex-wife did something similar during my second tour in Iraq. Not the house, but wiped out our accounts. Military spouses, man, they're either stronger than steel or they can't handle it. No in between. How'd you get through it? I asked. Day by day. Then I met Elena. 5 years and 2 kids later, I thank God every day my ex left. He pulled out his phone to show me pictures of his family. A smiling woman with 2 young boys, all wearing Colorado Rockies jerseys. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best. His words stayed with me that night as I composed an email to Sarah, the first direct communication since learning of her betrayal. Sarah, I won't pretend to understand why you've chosen this path, or why you felt it necessary to do this while I'm deployed. You could have waited, told me to my face that our marriage was over. Instead, you've made choices that reflect on your character, not mine. I've instructed James to proceed with the divorce. You won't get the house, the paperwork and prenup are clear. You'll return the $43,000 you took from our joint savings, as the judge has already ordered. After that, we never need to speak again. I deserve better than what you've done, and someday I'll find it. I didn't expect a reply, but one came the next morning. You were never here, Michael. 4 deployments in 12 years. I spent more time with your family photos than with you. Todd is present, Todd is here. Keep your precious house and money. I've already moved on. Her words stung because they carried a kernel of truth. I had been absent, though not by choice. The military life she'd once claimed to understand had become the wedge between us, but that didn't justify theft and deception. I read her email 10 times before shutting my laptop and heading for a run around the base perimeter. The physical exertion helped clear my head, the rhythmic pounding of my boots on hard-packed sand, drowning out Sarah's accusations. 5 miles later, I returned to my quarters sweaty but calmer, the emotional edge blunted. That evening, Captain Lewis stopped by for what I initially thought was a work matter. Got a minute, Bennett? He asked, leaning against the doorframe of my quarters. Of course, sir. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Word has gotten around about your situation back home. I want you to know the command is aware and concerned. My face heated with embarrassment. The last thing I wanted was for my personal problems to become official business. I appreciate the concern, but it won't affect my performance, I assured him. Lewis sat on the edge of my desk. I know that, but deployment is hard enough without dealing with what you're going through. My first tour, my fiancée sent back my ring in a care package. He shook his head at the memory. No note, just the ring buried under some cookies and baby wipes. I winced. That's cold. Point is, these things happen to the best of us. The JAG office has seen 100 cases like yours. They've offered to review your situation, provide any additional legal counsel needed. James, my lawyer back home, seems to have things under control. Good to hear. Lewis stood to leave, then paused. Bennett, take the help that's offered. You'd do the same for any of your men. After he left, I opened my laptop again and composed an email to the JAG office, attaching the documentation James had been gathering. Another layer of protection couldn't hurt. The next day brought an unexpected message from our former neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, an 80-year-old widow who had lived next door since we'd bought the house. Captain Bennett, I hope this finds you safe. I wanted you to know that strange things are happening at your house. The woman who said she's your wife has been bringing in contractors. They removed your beautiful oak tree last Tuesday, the one you told me your grandfather planted as a sapling. I tried to stop them, told them you treasured that tree, but they had paperwork they claimed authorized the removal, something about foundation concerns. But the tree was healthy. I took pictures for you. God bless and come home safe. The attached photos showed a stump where the 60-year-old oak had stood, the tree my grandfather had indeed planted as a sapling that had grown alongside 3 generations of our family. I'd brought a cutting from his property and planted it when we first bought the house. Sarah knew what that tree meant to me. This felt different from the financial manipulations or even moving her new boyfriend in. This was deliberately destroying something irreplaceable, something with sentimental value that couldn't be recovered with court orders or legal maneuvers. I forwarded Mrs. Calloway's email to James with a terse note. She's cutting down family heirlooms now. His reply was equally brief. Filing for emergency injunction against further property alterations. Court date tomorrow. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings continued from afar, with James sending regular updates. Sarah fought the judge's orders until her lawyer apparently explained the futility of her position and the potential for criminal charges related to the attempted property transfer. She returned the money in installments, each one accompanied by an email filled with recriminations. My deployment was extended by 2 months due to regional instability. In some ways, I was grateful for the distance from the divorce drama back home. My unit had become a surrogate family, especially Rodriguez and Lewis, who made sure I wasn't alone with my thoughts too often. One night, as several of us played cards in the recreation tent, Rodriguez nudged my shoulder. "You ever think your ex did you a favor?" I looked up from my cards, surprised. "A favor? Showing her true colors while you still have time to rebuild. Imagine if she'd waited until you were 50, had kids, then pulled this stunt." The thought hadn't occurred to me. At 34, I still had plenty of life ahead. Time to find someone worthy of trust. Maybe even start that family I'd always wanted. Miller, one of the younger sergeants at the table, nodded enthusiastically. My uncle went through something similar. Said 5 years later it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Found a woman who actually understood commitment. I laid down my cards. Full house. Rodriguez groaned and tossed his cards on the table. "Man, your poker face got way better since this divorce started." I laughed, genuinely laughed, for what felt like the first time in months. Silver linings. Later that week, a care package arrived from Kate. Amid the usual snacks, magazines, and toiletries was a small wooden box I recognized from my grandfather's study. Inside was his service watch from Vietnam, along with a note. He always said to save this for when you needed a reminder of who you come from. Thought that time might be now. You're a Bennett. Bennett's endure. The watch was nothing fancy, a simple military-issue timepiece with a worn leather strap. But my grandfather had worn it through his entire tour in 1969 to 70, through firefights and monsoons, and the long journey home. It had been with him when he met my grandmother, when my father was born, when he started the construction business, that put my father through college and helped with the down payment on my house. I strapped it to my wrist, the leather surprisingly supple after all these years. The weight of it was comforting, a physical connection to the man who'd taught me about honor and perseverance. Whatever Sarah took from me, she couldn't take this heritage. Then came the email that changed everything again. "Michael, I've received an interesting offer from Sarah's attorney," James wrote. "She wants to drop all claims to your military pension and future benefits in exchange for keeping the furniture and her car. She's also offering to cover her own legal fees if we can expedite the process. From a negotiation standpoint, this is a major concession from her initial position. Typically, spouses are entitled to a portion of military pension based on the marriage duration. Her willingness to walk away from this suggests something has changed. I recommend we accept before she reconsiders." I wrote back immediately, "What's changed? This feels like a trap." James's response came the next day. I did some digging. Apparently, Todd's real estate business is struggling with some licensing issues. 3 complaints have been filed. with the Colorado Real Estate Commission alleging ethical violations. Sarah seems eager to finalize things and move to Arizona with him. My theory? Todd's professional problems are accelerating their plans, and she wants out cleanly before his situation potentially affects her. I laughed out loud in the middle of the command center, earning strange looks from two junior officers nearby. The karma was almost too perfect. Sarah had chosen a man who was as dishonest in business as she had been in our marriage. "Accept the offer," I wrote back. "Let her go with the furniture. I'll buy new." The next morning, I received a surprising email from Sarah herself, the first direct communication in nearly 2 months. "Michael, I assume James has told you about my offer. I want you to know this isn't about Todd's business issues. I simply want to move forward with my life without dragging this out any longer. The house is yours. It always meant more to you than to me anyway. I've already found a place I prefer in Scottsdale. As for the pension, I don't want anything. That would keep us connected long term. A clean break is best for both of us. I hope you can agree to these terms without reading malicious intent into everything I do." I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond to this sudden reasonableness after months of hostility. Was this genuine desire for resolution, or another, manipulation? In the end, I simply wrote back, "I agree to the terms. James will handle the details." Her reply was almost immediate. "Thank you. For what it's worth, I never meant for things to get this ugly. I hope someday you can forgive me." Forgiveness wasn't even on my radar yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal too complete. Instead of responding, I closed my laptop and went to brief my unit on the day's logistics operations. The rhythm of military life continued, a constant in the chaos of my personal world. That evening, I found myself in a video call with James, Kate, and Jake, a rare opportunity when base communications and their schedules aligned. Kate had organized it as a war council, her term for our strategy sessions. "So she's really giving up claims to the pension?" Kate asked, her skepticism evident even through the pixelated video. "That seems suspicious." James leaned forward. "On paper, it's a significant concession. The marriage length would entitle her to about 25% of his military retirement. That's not small change over a lifetime." Jake, always the most straightforward of my friends, cut to the chase. "She's running from something. Nobody gives up guaranteed money unless they're scared of something worse." "Todd's real estate license," I suggested. "If he's facing ethical violations—" "It's more than that," James interrupted. "I've been making inquiries. Apparently Todd's under investigation for mortgage fraud, encouraging clients to falsify information on loan applications, then collecting commissions on properties they couldn't really afford." Kate's eyes widened. "So Sarah's not just leaving you for an unethical real estate agent. She's leaving you for a potential felon. And she wants no financial ties that might come up in his investigation," James added. "No paper trail connecting her assets to yours." The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. Sarah wasn't just protecting herself from an inconvenient marriage. She was protecting herself from legal exposure. The woman I'd loved, trusted with everything, had fallen so far from the person I thought I'd married. "Take the deal," Kate urged. "Let her go with the furniture and whatever else she wants. Just get her out of your life before this gets even messier." James nodded in agreement. "From a legal standpoint, this is the cleanest exit possible. You keep the house, your pension, your future earnings. She walks away with depreciating assets and a potential criminal boyfriend." 2 weeks before my delayed return to the States, James sent confirmation that the divorce was finalized. Sarah had indeed walked away with only personal belongings and her car, relinquishing all claims to the house, my military benefits, and my future pension. According to James, she and Todd had already relocated to Phoenix, where he claimed to have better business opportunities. The paperwork arrived in my email, legal documents marking the end of 14 years together. I should have felt something profound, grief, relief, anger, something. Instead, I felt oddly numb as I digitally signed where indicated and returned. The forms. That night I dreamed of the oak tree Sarah had cut down. In the dream, I was a child sitting under its branches at my grandfather's property, listening to his stories about Vietnam, about building his business, about meeting my grandmother. When I woke, I found my face wet with tears I hadn't allowed myself while awake. The next morning, I received a small package, expedited delivery from the States, a rarity on base. Inside was a small container and a note from Mrs. Calloway. Captain Bennett, I collected these acorns from your oak before they took it down. I've been keeping them moist as my late husband taught me. They should still be viable to plant when you return. Some things can be regrown. I sat on my bunk, holding the container of acorns, overwhelmed by this small kindness from an elderly neighbor who understood what Sarah had not, that some things have value beyond their practical use or monetary worth. Some things connect us to our past and future simultaneously. I wrote back to Mrs. Calloway immediately, thanking her for her thoughtfulness and promising to plant the acorns when I returned. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope, not for reconciliation with Sarah, but for rebuilding a life that honored what mattered to me. As my deployment neared its end, I began making plans for my return. Kate and Jake had volunteered to help me detoxify the house, as they put it, removing or replacing anything that reminded me too strongly of Sarah. James had arranged for a cleaning service and new bedroom furniture as his divorce gift. Mrs. Calloway promised to water the acorns I would plant and send photos as they sprouted. In my final week in Afghanistan, Captain Lewis called me into his office. "Bennett, take a seat." I braced myself, wondering if there was yet another deployment extension coming. "I've been impressed with how you've handled yourself these past months," he said. "Personal crisis, extended deployment, increasing responsibilities. You've managed it all without compromising the mission. Thank you, sir. When we get back, there's an opening at Fort Carson's Logistics Training Division. No deployments for at least 2 years. I've recommended you for the position." The offer was exactly what I needed. Time to rebuild my life, without the additional strain of another immediate deployment. "I'd be honored, sir," I replied, trying to maintain professional composure despite the relief washing through me. Lewis nodded, then added with unusual informality, "Life has a way of testing us, Bennett. Some break under the pressure. Others, like you, come through stronger." On my last night at the base, Rodriguez and several other men from my unit presented me with a handmade card signed by everyone. Inside was a gift certificate to a home improvement store with a note, "For rebuilding. The foundation is still solid." As our transport plane lifted off Afghan soil the next morning, I looked out the window at the harsh landscape below. I had arrived 5 months earlier, a married man building toward a future with Sarah. I was leaving single, betrayed, but somehow more complete in my understanding of myself and what I valued. The long flight home gave me time to reflect on what had been lost and what remained. Sarah had taken furniture, money, trust, but she hadn't taken my home, my career, my friends, or my future. Thanks to James's foresight, I still had a foundation to build upon. More importantly, I still had my integrity. I hadn't lowered myself to Sarah's level of deception or vindictiveness. I had fought for what was rightfully mine, but hadn't tried to destroy her in the process. That moral high ground was worth more than any piece of furniture or financial settlement. As the plane descended toward Colorado Springs, I felt my grandfather's watch on my wrist, a reminder of the heritage of resilience I carried. Whatever came next, I was a Bennett, and Bennett's endure. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings continued from afar, with James sending regular updates. Sarah fought the judge's orders until her lawyer apparently explained the futility of her position and the potential for criminal charges related to the attempted property transfer. She returned the money in installments, each one accompanied by an email filled with recriminations. My deployment was extended by 2 months due to regional instability. In some ways, I was grateful for the distance from the divorce drama back home. My unit had become a surrogate family, especially Rodriguez and Lewis, who made sure I wasn't alone with my thoughts too often. Then came the email that changed everything again. "Michael, I've received an interesting offer from Sarah's attorney," James wrote. "She wants to drop all claims to your military pension and future benefits in exchange for keeping the furniture and her car. She's also offering to cover her own legal fees if we can expedite the process. From a negotiation standpoint, this is a major concession from her initial position. Typically, spouses are entitled to a portion of military pension based on the marriage duration. Her willingness to walk away from this suggests something has changed. I recommend we accept before she reconsiders." I wrote back immediately, "What's changed? This feels like a trap." James's response came the next day. "I did some digging. Apparently, Todd's real estate business is struggling with some licensing issues. 3 complaints have been filed with the Colorado Real Estate Commission alleging ethical violations. Sarah seems eager to finalize things and move to Arizona with him. My theory: Todd's professional problems are accelerating their plans, and she wants out cleanly before his situation potentially affects her." I laughed out loud in the middle of the command center, earning strange looks from 2 junior officers nearby. The karma was almost too perfect. Sarah had chosen a man who was as dishonest in business as she had been in our marriage. "Accept the offer," I wrote back. "Let her go with the furniture. I'll buy new." 2 weeks before my delayed return to the States, James sent confirmation that the divorce was finalized. Sarah had indeed walked away with only personal belongings and her car, relinquishing all claims to the house, my military benefits, and my future pension. According to James, she and Todd had already relocated to Phoenix, where he claimed to have better business opportunities. The day I finally flew back to Colorado Springs Airport, a small welcoming committee awaited me. My sister Kate with her husband, James with his wife Emma, and Jake with a sign reading "Freedom on all fronts" in giant letters that earned disapproving looks from more conservative military families reuniting nearby. Kate hugged me first, whispering, "The house is all set up. We cleared out all her stuff, repainted, new furniture, fresh start." James shook my hand, then pulled me into an unexpected hug. "Told you I had it handled." "How can I ever thank you?" I asked him. "You already did, by making me executor of your grandfather's trust when we were in law school. I've been looking out for your interests for 15 years, Mike, not about to stop now." That evening, they took me to my house alone now, in the quiet Colorado Springs neighborhood Sarah and I had chosen for its good schools and proximity to base. Kate hadn't exaggerated about the transformation. Every trace of Sarah was gone, replaced by new furniture, fresh paint in colors I would have chosen, and a fully stocked refrigerator. "We set up the spare bedroom as a home office," Jake explained, showing me the room that had once been designated as a future nursery. "Figured you might want to start thinking about what comes after the army." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on my new couch in my reclaimed house, surrounded by the tangible support of people who truly cared for me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. 14 years with Sarah, gone. The future we'd planned, erased. I pulled out my phone and found myself looking at old photos of us in happier times. Sarah cheering at my promotion ceremony, both of us hiking in the Rockies, her smile at our wedding. Had it all been a lie? Or had we simply grown in different directions until we became unrecognizable to each other? I was still scrolling when a text from James arrived. "Stop looking at old pictures and get some sleep. Tomorrow we're taking you to Murphy's to celebrate your return and your freedom. No wallowing allowed." I smiled, put the phone away, and for the first time since that first devastating email in Afghanistan, I felt something like hope. The next morning, I woke to the unfamiliar sound of silence in my own bedroom. No barracks noise, no helicopters, no distant explosions, just the quiet of a Colorado neighborhood beginning its day. For a moment it felt wrong, like I'd somehow broken protocol by sleeping past Doe 500. I made coffee in a kitchen that looked both familiar and strange. Kate had replaced the coffee maker, the dishes, even the kitchen towels, erasing all traces of the life I'd shared with Sarah. The pragmatic side of me appreciated the gesture. The sentimental side felt disoriented, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. As promised, James, Jake, and Kate's husband Paul arrived that evening to take me to Murphy's, our favorite pub since college days. The place hadn't changed in 15 years. Same dark wood tables, same vintage beer signs, same cranky Irish owner behind the bar who pretended not to remember regulars. "Captain Bennett!" Murphy called out as we entered, immediately disproving my theory. "About bloody time you showed up. These fools have been drowning their sorrows without you for months." "Good to see you too, Murphy," I replied, surprised by the warmth of his greeting. "First round's on the house," he declared, already pulling a pint of my favorite stout. "For service to country and for surviving that harpy ex-wife of yours." I tensed momentarily, then laughed. Of course everyone knew. In a military town like Colorado Springs, word traveled fast, especially when it involved a spouse taking advantage during deployment. "To Michael," James said, raising his glass once we'd settled into our corner booth, "for defending our country and his home on two fronts." "And to James," Jake added, "the lawyer who saw the hurricane coming and built a bomb shelter without telling anyone." We drank, laughed, and for a few hours I felt normal again, just a guy having beers with his friends, not a soldier recovering from both war and betrayal. Later in the evening, as James and Paul argued good-naturedly about baseball standings, Jake leaned in closer. "You doing okay? Really?" I considered the question. Getting there. Sometimes it hits me all at once. Everything I lost. Everything that changed while I was gone. Other times I feel this weird sense of freedom, like I've been given a second chance. Jake nodded. "When Lisa and I split, I kept having these moments of whiplash. One minute I'd be fine, the next I'd be curled up on the floor. It passes, though, gets easier." I'd almost forgotten Jake had been through his own divorce years earlier, before meeting his current wife. How long did it take to feel normal again? About a year before I stopped reaching for her in the middle of the night. 2 before I could drive past our old favorite restaurant without feeling sick. He took a swig of beer. 5 years later, I barely remember what it felt like to be married to her, and thank God for that. The honesty was refreshing. Everyone else had been so careful, offering encouragement, focusing on the practical aspects of recovery, avoiding any suggestion that the pain might linger. "The thing no one tells you about betrayal," Jake continued, "is that it makes you question everything. Not just the relationship, but your own judgment. How did I miss the signs? Who else is lying to me? That's the part that takes longest to heal." I nodded, recognition hitting hard. "Exactly. But you know what? Eventually you realize that trusting people, even knowing they might hurt you, is better than the alternative. Lisa screwed me over. Doesn't mean Rachel will." Rachel was His new wife, a kindergarten teacher with a laugh you could hear from across the room. Wise words from a guy who once tried to jump off your roof into a kiddie pool, I said, trying to lighten the moment. Jake grinned. Even idiots learn eventually. The next morning, despite a mild hangover, I woke with a sense of purpose that had been missing since my return. Jake's perspective had shifted something in me. Yes, Sarah had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Yes, my confidence in my own judgment was shaken. But I refused to let her actions define my future. I pulled out a notebook and began making lists. Projects for the house, career options, post-military, places I wanted to travel, skills I wanted to learn. The act of planning, of looking forward rather than back, felt therapeutic. My phone rang mid-morning. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "Captain Bennett, this is Martha Calloway from next door." Mrs. Calloway was an elderly widow who had lived in the neighborhood since before Sarah and I bought our house. She'd always been kind, bringing over cookies when we moved in, collecting our mail during deployments. "Mrs. Calloway, good to hear from you. I'm back from Afghanistan." "I know, dear." "I saw your friends fixing up the place. Such nice, young people." Her voice warmed. "I wanted to check if you'd be home this afternoon. I have something for you." "I'll be here all day," I assured her. True to her word, Mrs. Calloway appeared. On my doorstep at precisely 2 p.m., carrying a small terracotta pot. "Welcome home, Captain," she said, handing me the pot. Inside was a small sapling, no more than 8 inches tall. When Sarah cut down your grandfather's oak tree, I was heartbroken for you. I remembered how you told me the story, when you first planted it." Mrs. Calloway's eyes misted slightly. "I gathered some acorns that fall, just in case something ever happened to it. Started growing this one last year. It's ready for planting now." I stared at the tiny oak sapling, emotion catching in my throat. During my first month in the house, I'd spent a weekend planting an oak sapling from my grandfather's property. It was a tradition in our family. My grandfather had planted one when he built his first house after Vietnam. My father had transplanted one to our childhood home. When I bought this house, my grandfather, then in his 80s, had helped me continue the tradition. Sarah had known what that tree meant to me. Its destruction wasn't just property damage, it was a deliberate attack on my heritage, on the connection to my family's past. "Mrs. Calloway, I don't know what to say." My voice was rough, with unshed tears. "No need to say anything, dear. Just plant it somewhere with good morning sun, and know that some roots go deeper than others." She patted my arm. "Your grandfather would be proud of how you've handled all this." After she left, I took the sapling to the backyard and surveyed the space. The stump of the original tree had been removed, the ground smoothed over. I chose a spot near the back fence, where the young tree would have room to grow for decades to come. As I dug the hole, my mind drifted to the generations of Bennett men who had planted these trees, markers of permanence, of commitment to a place and future. My grandfather had returned from war and put down literal roots. My father had continued the tradition. Now returning from my own war, both foreign and domestic, I was doing the same. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Sarah had tried to erase my past by cutting down the original tree. By planting this new sapling, I was reclaiming both my history and my future. I settled the young oak into its new home, patted soil around its delicate roots, and watered it thoroughly. "Grow strong," I murmured, feeling slightly foolish talking to a tree, but compelled nonetheless. That afternoon, I called the Army career counselor to discuss my options. My current assignment at Fort Carson's Logistics Training Division would last 2 years. After that, I had decisions to make. 20 years of service would make me eligible for full retirement benefits, but that milestone was still 6 years away. "Your record is excellent, Captain Bennett," the counselor said after reviewing my file. Glowing evaluations, solid experience, advanced logistics training. You could easily continue toward Lieutenant Colonel if you're interested in that track. And if I'm considering civilian options after my current assignment, with your background, defense contracting, logistics management for major corporations, consultancy work, all extremely viable. You'd be surprised how many companies actively recruit military logistics officers. The skill set transfers remarkably well. The conversation left me feeling optimistic. I had options, pathways forward that didn't depend on anyone else's loyalty or commitment. My career at least remained solid. That evening, Kate called to check in. "How's day 2 of freedom treating you?" "Better than day 1, I admitted. I planted a new oak sapling. Mrs. Calloway saved acorns from the original tree. That wonderful woman. We should send her flowers." "Already ordered," I said, having done exactly that after our meeting. "You sound better," Kate observed. "Less dull, hollow." "I'm getting there. Having a plan helps, or at least the beginnings of one." "Good. Because we all have an ulterior motive for helping you reclaim your life so quickly." I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it through. "The phone." "Oh? Lauren is moving back to Colorado Springs next month. Remember Lauren, Emma's friend from college, the pediatric nurse who thought you were, and I, quote, too good-looking to be smart?" I vaguely recalled meeting Lauren at James and Emma's wedding years ago, tall, auburn-haired, with a sharp wit and sharper elbows on the dance floor. "Kate, I'm barely divorced." "I'm not suggesting marriage," she said with exaggerated patience. "Just dinner, with an attractive, intelligent woman who is not Sarah. Think of it as practice for rejoining the land of the living." "I'll think about it," I promised, neither committing nor refusing. "That's all I ask. Now, are you coming to Sunday dinner this weekend? Paul's grilling those steaks you like." The easy domesticity of her invitation warmed me. This was what Sarah had never understood, the importance of family, of showing up, of creating traditions that anchored you during life's storms. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. The next week fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings at the base, training new logistics officers, afternoons working on house projects, replacing the deck Sarah had always complained about, setting up my home office, learning to cook proper meals for myself instead of relying on takeout. Evenings spent reading, planning, occasionally socializing with James or Kate's family. I was adapting to my new reality faster than expected, finding satisfaction in the simple act of rebuilding my life on my own terms. The hollow feeling still surfaced occasionally, especially at night, but its appearances grew less frequent, its grip less intense. 10 days after my return, I received a voicemail from an unexpected source, Melissa Chen, our former realtor who had helped us buy the house. "Captain Bennett, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I heard about your situation from mutual connections. I'd like to speak with you regarding some irregularities with your property that have come to my attention. Please call me at your convenience." Intrigued and slightly concerned, I returned her call that afternoon. "Michael, thank you for calling back," Melissa said, her professional demeanor evident even over the phone. "First, let me say I'm sorry about what happened. The real estate community here is relatively small, and Todd Prescott's behavior has been a topic of discussion." "I appreciate that," I said, uncertain where this was heading. "The reason I'm calling is this. Several months ago, I received notification that your property was being listed with another agency. Normally, I wouldn't. Think twice about it. Clients change realtors all the time. But then I heard through colleagues that Todd Prescott was representing the sale, and that seemed unusually coincidental." My stomach tightened. Sarah tried to sell our house without my knowledge? That's what concerned me. I checked the listing details, and while your name was on the initial paperwork as a seller, the signature didn't match the one I had on file from when you purchased the property. She forged my signature. The betrayal somehow still had the power to shock. I can't definitively say it was forgery without a formal investigation, but the discrepancy was significant enough that I flagged it with the Colorado Real Estate Commission. Given Mr. Prescott's current ethical investigations, they were particularly interested. I leaned back in my chair, processing this new information. What does this mean exactly? For you? Nothing actionable at this point, since I understand the property situation has been legally resolved. For Mr. Prescott and potentially Sarah, it's part of a broader investigation into his business practices. I thought you should know, given that your name was involved without your apparent consent. After thanking Melissa for her integrity, I immediately called James to relay the conversation. Well, he said when I finished, the plot thickens. Forged signatures on real estate documents are a felony offense in Colorado. No wonder she was suddenly so eager to settle. Should we do something with this information? James paused, considering. From a legal standpoint, the divorce is finalized to your benefit. Pursuing criminal charges against Sarah for forgery would be a separate matter, emotionally taxing, time-consuming, with limited practical benefit to you now. So we let it go? That's your decision, Mike. But sometimes the best revenge is moving forward, while others face the consequences of their own actions. The Real Estate Commission investigation will proceed with or without your involvement. Todd's career is likely finished in Colorado, possibly nationwide depending on the findings. Sarah tied her fortunes to his. Natural consequences may be the most fitting justice. I thought about it overnight, weighing the satisfaction of seeing Sarah face formal consequences against the emotional cost of prolonging my involvement in her drama. By morning, my decision was clear. I would provide information if formally requested by investigators, but I wouldn't actively pursue charges. My energy belonged to rebuilding, not retribution. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected letter. Formal. Colorado Real Estate Commission letterhead requesting my testimony regarding the property listing and potentially forged documents. I called the investigator listed on the letter. Captain Bennett, thank you for reaching out, said Investigator Pearson, a former police officer turned real estate regulator. We're building a case against Todd Prescott for multiple violations, including the attempted sale of your property under questionable circumstances. I'm willing to cooperate, I said, but I need to understand what would be required of me. At this stage, a written statement addressing specific questions would be sufficient. If the case proceeds to a formal hearing, testimony might be needed, but that's months away if it happens at all. I agreed to provide the statement, answering detailed questions about my knowledge of the listing, confirming I had never authorized the sale, and verifying that the signature on the documents wasn't mine. The process was straightforward, but left me with a renewed sense of violation. Sarah hadn't just tried to take our home, she had potentially committed criminal fraud to do it. The investigator's final question caught me off guard. Would you be willing to pursue criminal charges against Sarah Bennett regarding the forgery? I hesitated, James's advice echoing in my mind. I'm focused on moving forward with my life, I finally said. I'll cooperate with your investigation into Prescott's professional conduct, but I'm not interested in pursuing separate criminal charges against my ex-wife. I understand, Pearson replied, his tone neutral. For what it's worth, Captain, your restraint is commendable. Many in your position would want scorched earth. Maybe 6 months ago I would have. Maybe even 1 month ago. But the man who had returned from Afghanistan was not the same one who had deployed. I had seen enough destruction of buildings, of lives, of trust. I didn't need to create more. Later that week, I met James for lunch at a cafe near his office. Spring had fully arrived in Colorado Springs, the mountains still snow-capped, but the valley warm and blooming. We sat on the patio, enjoying the sunshine after months of desert. heat or office confinement, depending on our respective recent experiences. You look better, James observed, studying me over his sandwich, less haunted. I feel better, I admitted. Still moments of anger, still nights when I wake up reaching for someone who isn't there, but they're less frequent. That's progress. What about the Real Estate Commission investigation? I filled him in on my conversation with investigator Pearson and my decision not to pursue criminal charges. James nodded slowly. A good choice, I think. The professional consequences for Todd will be severe enough. Sarah will face the collateral damage of hitching her wagon to his star. According to Mrs. Calloway's gossip network, they've already left Arizona. Apparently his license issues followed him there. Not surprising, state boards communicate about problem agents. James set down his sandwich, his expression turning serious. Mike, there's something I've been meaning to tell you about why I was so prepared for Sarah's moves. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. It wasn't just those questions she asked after the will update, though those were definitely red flags. He hesitated. Sarah approached me about divorce options while you were on your third deployment. She presented it as a hypothetical discussion about a friend in a military marriage, but the details were too specific. When I pressed her, she admitted she was considering her options, but wasn't ready to make any decisions. The revelation hit me harder than expected. Not just the timing, a full 2 years before her actual move, but the fact that James had carried this knowledge alone. Why didn't you tell me? Attorney-client privilege, initially. She consulted me professionally, even if she pretended it was hypothetical. By the time I was certain of her intentions, you were preparing for this deployment. I made a judgment call. Instead of burdening you with suspicions that might affect your focus in a combat zone, I prepared legally to protect you. I wanted to be angry at James for keeping secrets, at Sarah for her years of deception, but found I couldn't summon the energy for it. Instead, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. The betrayal had roots deeper and older than I'd imagined, stretching back through years I'd believed were solid, if occasionally strained. You did the right thing, I finally said. I would have been distracted, might have confronted her, probably, would have made emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Your approach saved my house, my pension, possibly my career focus during deployment. James visibly relaxed. I've been carrying that for a long time. Wasn't sure how you'd take it. I'm taking it as further confirmation that I married the wrong person and befriended the right ones. I raised my water glass. To friendship that outlasts betrayal. He clinked his glass against mine. And to finally having all the cards on the table. As we finished lunch, James brought up Kate's earlier suggestion about meeting Lauren. Emma's been pushing it too. Apparently Lauren asks about you every time they talk. I laughed. I'm still putting my life back together. Dating seems premature. Who said anything about dating? It's dinner with a friend of a friend. Low pressure, zero expectations. He shrugged. But it's your call. The idea no longer seemed as outlandish as it had 2 weeks earlier. I was sleeping better, feeling more settled in my reclaimed space, finding rhythm in my new reality. Maybe a casual dinner wouldn't be the worst thing. Tell Emma I'll think about it, I conceded. But not yet. Give me another month to get solid footing. James grinned. Progress. A month ago you would have shut this down completely. As we walked back to the parking lot, James's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and frowned slightly. It's the investigator from the Real Estate Commission. Mind if I take this? I gestured for him to go ahead, curious about the timing. James Thompson. Yes, he's actually with me now. I see. Yes, that is interesting. We'd need to see the documentation. Tomorrow morning works. He hung up, his expression unreadable. Pearson wants us to come in tomorrow. They've found something in Prescott's records that directly concerns you, beyond the attempted house sale." "What kind of something?" "He wouldn't say over the phone, but it was significant enough that he's coming into the office on a Saturday specifically to show us." James studied me. "Whatever it is, remember what matters now. You're home, the house is yours, the divorce is final. The rest is just confirmation of character you already understand." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Just when I thought I'd processed the full extent of Sarah's betrayal, new depths appeared. Would the revelations ever end? Or would I spend years discovering fresh evidence of how thoroughly I'd been deceived by the woman I'd once promised to love forever? That night, I stood in my backyard watering the oak sapling, which had already grown noticeably in the weeks since planting. "We're both transplants," I told it quietly, "both starting over, but our roots are solid, aren't they? We come from strong stock." As ridiculous as it seemed, talking to the tiny tree helped settle my thoughts. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, possibly new pain. But like my grandfather returning from Vietnam, like my father rebuilding after the recession took his first business, I would endure. Bennett's always did. The morning after James received the call from investigator Pearson, we arrived at the Colorado Real Estate Commission offices downtown. The building was mostly empty on a Saturday, our footsteps echoing in the marble-floored lobby. Pearson met us at the security desk, a trim, grey-haired man with the watchful eyes of his former police career still evident. "Captain Bennett, Mr. Thompson," he greeted us, shaking hands firmly. "Appreciate you coming in on short notice." He led us to a small conference room where folders and a laptop were already set up. The formal atmosphere made my stomach tighten. Whatever they'd found was serious enough to warrant this weekend meeting. "Coffee?" Pearson offered, gesturing to a carafe on the credenza. We both declined. I'd had enough caffeine already. My nerves were strung tight as it was. "Let me get right to the point," Pearson said, sitting across from us. "In the course of investigating Todd Prescott's business practices, we subpoenaed his email and financial records. What we found goes beyond real estate violations." He opened a folder and slid several printouts across the table. "These are emails between Prescott and Sarah Bennett, dating back 18 months ago. 18 months before my latest deployment. While Sarah and I were still living together, sharing meals, making plans, the timeline hit like a physical blow. The affair itself isn't our concern," Pearson continued, his tone professional. "What caught our investigators' attention were these specific exchanges about your property and finances." James picked up the printouts, scanning them quickly. His expression darkened as he read. "This is methodical." I steeled myself and looked at the emails James passed over. The first was from Sarah to Todd. M's grandfather left him more than we thought. Nearly $200K in a trust that's just sitting there. Plus, the house has built up decent equity, working on how to access both. The next was Todd's response. "Smart to focus on the house first. Let's get you added to the deed ASAP. Then we can look at refi options to pull out cash. Real estate market is hot. Could sell for 15 to 20% over what you paid easily." Email after email detailed their plan. Sarah would get her name on the deed, remove mine, take out a home equity loan, then sell the property and split the proceeds. With Todd, they'd also discussed ways to access my grandfather's trust fund, which James managed as executor. "They've been planning this for over a year," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, "while I was still home, while we were still." James placed a hand on my shoulder. "Keep reading." The later emails were even more damning. Once, I received deployment orders. Their plan accelerated. Todd wrote, "Perfect timing with the deployment. Military guys get so caught up in their missions they forget to check their finances. By the time he realizes what's happening, you'll be free and clear. Sarah's reply. Already moved 10K to my personal account. He didn't notice. We'll transfer the rest when he's overseas. Got his mail forwarded to a P.O. box so he won't see any notifications. D. Pearson gave me a moment to process before speaking again. Captain Bennett, I understand you chose not to pursue criminal charges regarding the forged signature on the property listing. In light of this additional evidence, I need to ask if you wish to reconsider. I looked at the emails spread before me, physical evidence of a betrayal more calculated and cold-blooded than I'd imagined. This wasn't an impulsive decision made during my absence. This was a long con, a premeditated financial attack orchestrated while I still believed we had a marriage worth saving. What are the potential charges? James asked, his lawyer mind already working. For Prescott, we're looking at multiple counts of real estate fraud, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, and potentially aiding and abetting the forgery. For Mrs. Bennett, possibly identity theft, forgery, bank fraud, mail fraud for the unauthorized mail forwarding, and conspiracy charges. Pearson leaned forward. These are serious offenses, Captain. Federal charges in some cases. The room seemed to shrink around me. My mind flashed to Sarah in prison, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her life destroyed. Despite everything she'd done, the image brought me no satisfaction. I need to think about it, I finally said. Pearson nodded. Of course, our investigation into Prescott's real estate violations continues regardless. We can pursue those charges without your involvement. The criminal matters directly involving your ex-wife would require your cooperation. James gathered the documents. Can we get copies of these? Already prepared for you, Pearson said, handing over a sealed envelope. Take your time, Captain. This office will proceed based on your decision. On the drive back to my house, James remained uncharacteristically silent, giving me space to process. My mind spun with the new revelations, trying to reconcile the woman I'd married with someone capable of such calculated deception. I keep thinking about all the moments that must have been lies, I finally said as we pulled into my driveway. When I got my deployment orders, she hugged me and said she'd miss me, all while planning to clean me out the moment I was gone. James parked but didn't move to get out. People compartmentalize, Mike. She probably did have genuine moments with you, even while planning this. Human beings are complicated. We can hold contradictory emotions simultaneously. That doesn't make it better. No, he agreed. It doesn't. We sat in silence for another minute before I asked the question weighing heaviest on my mind. What would you do if it were Emma who had done this to you? James considered carefully before answering. I'd want justice, but I'd also want peace. Sometimes those two goals conflict. He turned to face me directly. The question isn't what Sarah deserves, it's what you need to move forward. Inside my house, I paced the living room while James made coffee. The copied emails sat unopened on my coffee table, a ticking bomb of pain I wasn't ready to revisit. You don't have to decide today, James said, handing me a mug. Take some time. Consider what pursuing charges would mean practically. Depositions, possible testimony, prolonged contact with Sarah through the legal system, months, maybe years before resolution. Versus walking away, I said, letting her escape consequences. She hasn't escaped all consequences. She tied herself to a man now under investigation for fraud. She lost her claim to your pension, which over your lifetime could be worth far more than what she tried to steal. She's burned bridges in this community. He sipped his coffee. Sometimes the best revenge is living well while others self-destruct. That evening after James left, I found myself drawn to my grandfather's trunk in the basement, one of the few family heirlooms Sarah hadn't touched. Inside were his military medals, old photos, and a journal he'd kept during Vietnam. I'd read it before, but that night Certain passages stood out with new relevance. April 15th, 1969. Found out Mary's been writing to that college boy back home. Same one she swore was just a friend. Wanted to put my fist through something. Jensen says I should write her a letter ending things, but what's the point? Still, 8 months left on this tour. Deal with it when I get home. July 3rd, 1969. Lieutenant says focus on the mission. Keep your head on straight or you'll end up in a body bag. He's right. Can't control what's happening back home. Can only control myself. My actions, my responses. Keep moving forward. December 24th, 1969. Christmas Eve in this hellhole. Package from Mom today with cookies and news that Mary's engaged to college boy. Strange how it doesn't hurt anymore. Like the pain burned itself out when I wasn't looking. Maybe you can only carry anger so long before it gets too heavy. My grandfather had returned from Vietnam to find his girlfriend married to someone else. Yet he'd rebuilt his life, met my grandmother, started his construction business, raised my father, and lived what he always described as a life worth the struggle. He'd faced betrayal without letting it define him. I closed the journal, suddenly clear about my decision. First thing Monday morning, I called Investigator Pearson. I appreciate the thoroughness of your investigation, I told him, but I won't be pursuing criminal charges against Sarah. Pearson sounded surprised. Can I ask why? The evidence is quite compelling. Because I need to move forward more than I need retribution. I'll cooperate fully with the professional charges against Todd Prescott, but pursuing Sarah through the criminal justice system would keep me tied to her for years. I'm ready to be free of that connection. That's uncommonly gracious, given the circumstances. Not gracious, I corrected. Pragmatic. My life is back on track. I have my home, my career, my future secure. Pursuing charges would drag all that backward into a past I'm working to leave behind. After hanging up with Pearson, I felt lighter than I had in months. The decision wasn't about forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. Maybe never would be. It was about reclaiming my narrative, choosing the story I wanted to live, rather than remaining trapped in one defined by betrayal. I called James next to inform him of my decision. I support you either way, he said, but I think this is the right call for your peace of mind. There's one more thing, I added. I want to remove Sarah as beneficiary on a few insurance policies we never updated, plus review my will, clean break on all fronts. Already on it, James replied. I pulled the paperwork last week, figured you'd want everything settled. The next several weeks passed in a rhythm of healing and rebuilding. At work, my role training new logistics officers provided both challenge and satisfaction. At home, I continued personalizing my space, hanging artwork I liked, converting Sarah's former craft room into a home gym, planting a vegetable garden in the backyard near my growing oak sapling. Kate kept her promise about introducing me to Lauren, though not in the awkward setup I'd feared. Instead, she hosted a casual barbecue where Lauren was among several guests. We chatted easily about her pediatric nursing work, my deployment experiences, and unexpectedly, our shared love of wilderness hiking. No pressure, no expectations, just conversation that flowed naturally. As spring warmed into early summer, normalcy began to feel less like a performance and more like reality. The gaps where Sarah had been gradually filled with new experiences, new routines, new possibilities. Then, on a sunny Tuesday morning in June, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Sarah standing on my porch. She looked different. Hair shorter, styled differently, designer clothes replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. Her expression was guarded, uncertain. "Michael?" she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I tried calling, but your number changed." I stood frozen in the doorway, unprepared for this collision between my past and present. "What do you want, Sarah?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Can I come in? Just for a few minutes." Every instinct warned against it. This woman had plotted to destroy me financially, had betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way. Yet curiosity won out. What could possibly bring her back to this doorstep after everything? 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside to let her enter. Sarah walked into the living room, her eyes widening at the changes. It's so different. That was the point. She nodded, accepting the implicit rebuke. Michael, I don't know where to start. Why not with why you're here? I thought you were building a new life in Arizona. She sank onto the edge of my new sofa. That didn't work out. Todd's facing criminal charges there now too, more serious ones. She paused. Investigator Pearson told me you chose not to press charges against me, even after seeing those emails. Of course. That's what had prompted this visit, not remorse but relief at escaping consequences. I didn't do it for you, I clarified. I did it for me. Pursuing charges meant staying connected to you through a lengthy legal process. I preferred a clean break. Still, she insisted, you could have destroyed me. Most men would have. I'm not most men. You should remember that, considering you married me. She flinched at the edge in my voice. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. She took a deep breath. I'm not here to ask forgiveness, Michael. I know what I did was unforgivable. I'm here because Pearson also told me that you're cooperating with the case against Todd, and I want to do the same. That I hadn't expected. Why? Because he deserves consequences. Because I was stupid enough to believe his promises. Because... She looked down at her hands. Because it might be the only way to make even the smallest amends for what I did to you. I studied her, searching for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. Instead, I saw only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. What happened in Arizona? I asked. Todd was using client escrow accounts to fund his lifestyle. When investigators started closing in, he emptied our joint account and disappeared, left me with nothing but debts and a lease I couldn't afford. She laughed humorlessly. Karma, I suppose. Where are you staying now? My parents. Not ideal at 36, but I didn't have many options. She glanced around the room again. The house looks good. You always did have better taste than I gave you credit for. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Two people who had shared a bed, a home, a decade of history, now virtual strangers with a gulf of betrayal between them. Why did you do it, Sarah? Not just leaving. I could have understood. That, but the deception, the theft, the planning while I was still here, still thinking we had a marriage. She didn't answer immediately, seeming to consider the question with the seriousness it deserved. I was unhappy for a long time, she finally said. Your deployments, the moves, always feeling secondary to your career. But instead of being honest with you or myself, I built resentment, convinced myself I deserved compensation for the sacrifices I'd made. She shook her head. Then Todd came along, feeding that narrative, making grand promises. It became easier to justify each step. You could have just asked for a divorce, before I deployed, face to face, like adults. You're right. That's what a decent person would have done. She met my eyes directly. I wasn't decent, Michael. I was selfish and cowardly and greedy. There's no justification that makes it better. Her frankness was unexpected and, in its way, almost refreshing. After months of angry denials and accusations in her emails, "What do you want from me regarding Prescott?" I asked, bringing the conversation back to her stated purpose. "Nothing specific. Just wanted you to know I'm cooperating with the investigation. My testimony may reference conversations we had, financial details about our marriage. I didn't want you blindsided by that." "I appreciate the heads up," I said formally, as if speaking to a colleague rather than the woman who had once been the center of my world. Sarah stood, recognizing the implicit dismissal. "Your 5 minutes are up anyway." She moved toward the door, then paused. "The oak tree. I see you planted a new one. Mrs. Calloway saved acorns from the original. That doesn't surprise me. She always liked you better. Sarah hesitated. Cutting down that tree. That was unforgivable. Even more than the money. I knew what it meant to you. Yes, I agreed. You did. At the door, she turned once more. Are you happy, Michael? Or at least heading that way? The question caught me off guard with its apparent sincerity. I considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. I'm getting there. Some days are better than others, but yes, I think happiness is possible again. She nodded. Good. You deserve that. She stepped onto the porch. Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Sarah. And I watched her walk to her car, not the luxury SUV she'd driven during our marriage, but an older sedan with rental plates. As she pulled away, I expected to feel something. Anger reignited, perhaps, or painful nostalgia. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if watching the departure of someone I'd known in another lifetime. I called James immediately after she left. Sarah just came by the house, I told him. What? Why didn't you call me? I would have been there in 10 minutes. It wasn't necessary. She wanted to let me know she's cooperating with the investigation against Todd. That's unexpected, James said cautiously. Did she seem genuine? Hard to say. She's lost everything. Todd cleaned out their accounts and disappeared. She's living with her parents. The universe delivers its own justice sometimes. Seems that way. I paused. It was strange, James. Standing in the same room with her felt like meeting a stranger who happens to know intimate details about my life. There was nothing left of what we had. That's probably healthy at this point. Yeah, it felt like closure, in a way that signed divorce papers didn't. After hanging up, I went to the backyard to check on my oak sapling. It had grown noticeably in the month since planting, putting out fresh leaves that caught the afternoon. Sunlight. I touched one of the tiny branches gently. We're both going to be fine, I told it. Better than fine. That weekend, I accepted an invitation from Rodriguez and his family to join them for a picnic at Garden of the Gods Park. Elena, his wife, had packed enough food for 20 people, and their sons immediately adopted me as a temporary jungle. Jim. Uncle Mike, watch me climb this rock, the older boy called out, already scrambling up a boulder before I could respond. Carefully, Miguel, Elena warned, though her tone suggested this was a regular occurrence. Rodriguez handed me a beer as we settled on the picnic blanket. How's civilian life treating you? Still active duty, I reminded him, just training focused now. Close enough, no desert, no getting shot at, regular showers, practically retirement. I laughed. During our deployment, Rodriguez had threatened to kiss American soil when we returned. Based on Elena's eye roll, he'd probably made good on that promise. Life's good, I admitted, getting better every week. Heard your ex came crawling back, he said, lowering his voice so his family couldn't hear. News traveled fast in military circles, not exactly crawling, more like delivering information and searching for absolution. Did you give it to her? I thought about Sarah standing in my living room, diminished by her bad choices and their consequences. Not my absolution to give. That's between her and whatever higher power she believes in. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's why you made Captain Bennett, always the bigger man. The afternoon passed in pleasant conversation, chasing active children and enjoying Elena's exceptional cooking. As the sun began to set behind the dramatic red rock formations, casting long shadows across the park, I felt genuinely content for the first time in recent memory. On the drive home, my phone rang, Lauren's name appearing on the car's display. We'd exchanged numbers after Kate's barbecue and had texted occasionally since, but this was her first call. Hey, I answered, surprised by the slight jump in my pulse. Hi, Michael, she said. Hope I'm not interrupting anything. Just driving home from Garden of the Gods. Perfect timing, actually. I was wondering if you might want to grab dinner next weekend. I know this great Thai place downtown. The invitation hung in the air, its implications clear. This would be an actual date, not a casual meeting at a friend's gathering. I'd like that, I heard myself say, before doubt could intervene. Great. Saturday at 7? I can text you the address. After hanging up, I felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Dating again hadn't been on my radar when I returned from deployment, yet here I was, agreeing to dinner with an intelligent, attractive woman who somehow found me interesting despite knowing the outlines of my recent history. When I arrived home, I noticed Mrs. Calloway in her front yard, carefully deadheading roses despite the dimming light. I crossed the street to greet her. "Evening, Mrs. Calloway. Roses looking spectacular as always." She straightened with a smile. "Captain Bennett, just giving these beauties some attention before the heat wave they're predicting." She studied my face. "You look particularly cheerful tonight. Good day with friends and—" I hesitated. "I have a dinner date next weekend." Her face lit up. "Wonderful. That lovely nurse Kate introduced you to?" I shouldn't have been. Surprised she knew about Lauren. Mrs. Calloway missed nothing that happened in our neighborhood. "Yes, Lauren, we're going for Thai food." "I'm so pleased," she said, patting my arm. "Life does go on, doesn't it? Despite our best efforts to wallow." I laughed at her characteristic frankness. "It certainly does." "Oh, nearly forgot to tell you. Your little oak has a companion now." She gestured toward her yard. "I planted one of the acorns on my side of the fence. Figured our yards could share a matched set. Hope you don't mind." The simple gesture touched me deeply. "I think that's perfect, Mrs. Calloway." As I walked back to my house, I glanced at the tiny sapling in my yard and its even smaller counterpart in Mrs. Calloway's garden. From destruction, new growth. From betrayal, new connections. From endings, new beginnings. Back inside, I found myself drawn to the guest room closet where I'd stored the last box of items related to my marriage. Photos, too painful to display, but too significant to discard. Cards from our early years, mementos from trips we'd taken. I'd been avoiding this final act of sorting, uncertain whether to preserve these artifacts of a shared history that had ended in betrayal. Tonight, the decision felt clearer. I opened the box and began methodically separating its contents. Photos of family gatherings where Sarah appeared went into a keep pile, purely romantic mementos into a discard pile. I wasn't erasing the past, merely curating it to reflect a more accurate understanding of what had been real and what hadn't. The process was surprisingly painless. The woman in these photos, smiling beside me at my promotion ceremony, laughing on a beach in Hawaii, blowing out birthday candles, was someone I had loved. The fact that she had changed, or perhaps revealed her true nature later, didn't negate those moments entirely. They were part of my story, steps on the path that had led me here. When I finished, the keep pile was much smaller than the discard pile. I placed these selected memories in a simple photo album, wrote 2008 to 2022 on the cover, and shelved it between military yearbooks and family photo collections. Not hidden away, not prominently displayed, just one chapter in a longer story, still being written. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in months. When I woke, sunlight streaming through curtains I'd chosen myself, I felt the sensation people often describe after recovering from a long illness, the surprising joy of simply feeling normal again. At work the following Monday, Captain Lewis called me into his office. "Bennett, got a minute?" "Of course, sir." I took a seat, noting the stack of personnel files on his desk. "Two things. First, the Colonel was impressed with the training modifications you implemented last month. Completion rates up 12%, evaluation scores improved across the board. Just building on the foundation that was already in place, sir. Lewis waved off my modesty. Take the win, Bennett. Speaking of which, point 2. How would you feel about a promotion to Major? There's an opening in the command structure and your name is at the top of the recommendation list. The offer caught me completely off guard. Major, I hadn't expected to be considered for promotion for at least another year. Accelerated promotion track. Your performance evaluations have been exemplary, particularly how you maintain mission focus during your personal challenges overseas. He leaned forward. The Army values resilience, Bennett. You've demonstrated that in spades. I'm honored to be considered, sir. Don't just consider it, accept it. Promotion ceremony would be next month. Time to update those uniforms. Lewis stood, extending his hand. Congratulations, almost Major Bennett. I left his office in a daze, the unexpected professional advancement adding to my sense that life was finally realigning in a positive direction. Major Michael Bennett. My grandfather would have been proud. As I walked across the base to my next training session, I received a text from James, just heard from Pearson. Sarah's testimony led to additional charges against Prescott, mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, federal prosecutor involved now. Thought you'd want to know. I paused, absorbing this information. Sarah was following through on her promise. To cooperate, perhaps seeking redemption, perhaps just revenge against the man who had abandoned her. Either way, justice was proceeding without requiring my active participation. Thanks for the update, I texted back. Interesting development. Also, guess who's being promoted to Major? James's response was immediate. That calls for celebration. Dinner at our place this weekend. Emma's making her famous lasagna. Invite your Thai food date too, if timing works. I smiled at the suggestion. One step at a time. Let's not scare her off with the full friendship circle just yet. That evening, as I tended to my small vegetable garden beside the growing oak sapling, I reflected on the strange journey of the past 7 months, from the devastation of Sarah's betrayal to the slow, steady rebuilding of my life on more authentic foundations. The process hadn't been linear or easy, but standing in my backyard, a major-to-be with a home that was truly mine, growing friendships, and even the possibility of new romance on the horizon, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon. I felt whole, not unchanged. The experience had altered me permanently, made me more cautious perhaps, more appreciative of genuine loyalty, more aware of my own resilience. But whole nonetheless. Complete in myself, without gaps that needed filling by someone else. My grandfather had written something similar in his journal after returning from Vietnam. A man must be complete in himself before he can be completely with another. Otherwise, he's just looking for someone to make him whole, and that's too heavy a burden to place on anyone else's shoulders. As the sunset painted my small piece of Colorado in warm, golden light, I silently thanked James for seeing what I couldn't, for protecting me when I was vulnerable, for being the kind of friend who plans for storms while hoping they never come. I thanked Rodriguez and Lewis for their steady presence during deployment, Mrs. Calloway for her thoughtful kindness with the acorns, Kate for her unwavering support. And in a strange way, I even felt gratitude towards Sarah, not for her betrayal, which remained unforgivable, but for inadvertently setting me on a path to discovering my own strength, to building a life more authentic than the one we'd shared. Sometimes the worst storms clear the ground for better foundations. I looked up at the mountains in the distance, solid and unchanging despite all human dramas played out in their shadow. My grandfather's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, connecting me to a heritage of men who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. The tiny oak stretched its leaves toward the fading light, already showing the promise of the towering tree it would one day become. Whatever came next, career advancement, new relationships, challenges yet unforeseen, I was ready to face it. Not as a victim of betrayal, but as a man who had weathered a storm and rebuilt stronger than before. The future stretched before me, a path of my own choosing, no longer shadowed by deception or regret. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard of my house, truly my house now in every sense, surrounded by friends at what Jake insisted on calling my Independence Day cookout. Rodriguez and his family were there, his boys playing catch in the yard. Kate and her husband manned the grill. James and Emma brought a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne. As sunset painted the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and purples, with Pikes Peak silhouetted in the distance, James raised his glass. To Major Michael Bennett, he said, who served his country with honor, faced betrayal with dignity, and built himself a new life with courage, and who, thankfully, always signs paperwork without reading the fine print when his lawyer friend tells him to. Everyone laughed, even me, especially me. And to good friends, I added, raising my own glass in return, who plan ahead for the storms they see coming, even when we're looking the other way. Later, as guests began to depart, I found myself alone with James on the new deck I'd built myself over the summer, a project that had given my hands purpose, while my mind processed everything that had happened. "I never properly thanked you," I said, "not just for the legal work, but for seeing what I couldn't or wouldn't see." James looked out at the mountains. "You know what the hardest part was? Watching you deploy, knowing what she might be. Planning, but having no concrete proof. I couldn't warn you based on just suspicion and risk, making your deployment even more stressful if I was wrong. So instead, you built a legal fortress around me. That's what friends do," he said simply. "They protect each other's blind spots." As the last light faded from the sky, Lauren arrived. She'd been working a late shift at the hospital and had texted that she'd try to stop by after. We'd been dating for 3 months now, taking things slowly, building something careful and genuine. She knew my history, understood my occasional hesitation, and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. "Did I miss the whole party?" she asked, accepting the glass of wine Emma immediately offered her. "Just the loud part," I said. "The good part's still going." She smiled, sliding her hand into mine with the easy familiarity we'd developed. "How was your day, Major?" The promotion had become official last month, complete with a ceremony where Kate had pinned the gold oak leaf to my uniform, her eyes suspiciously bright. The title still felt new, but Lauren enjoyed using it. Half teasing, half proud, productive. Finalized the training schedule for next quarter, approved equipment requisitions, met with the colonel about expanding the program. I squeezed her hand. Better now. Rodriguez's boys had discovered the fireflies emerging in the yard and were attempting to catch them in cupped hands, their delighted shrieks providing background music to our quiet conversation. Elena watched from the edge of the deck, her face serene in the soft light from the string lights I'd installed. "Children are magic," Lauren observed softly. As a pediatric nurse, her love for kids was both professional and personal. She'd mentioned wanting her own someday, but not in a way that created pressure or expectation, just a fact about herself, offered honestly. "They are," I agreed, watching Rodriguez demonstrate the proper firefly catching technique with exaggerated stealth that had his sons collapsing in giggles. Later, after everyone had gone except Lauren, we sat on the porch swing I'd hung the previous weekend. The night was cool, but not cold, stars impossibly bright above the darkened yard. "I have news," she said, her tone casual, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. "I've been offered a position at Children's Hospital in Denver, pediatric trauma team, specialized care. It's, kind of my dream job." My heart sank slightly. Denver was an hour away in good traffic. Not impossible for a relationship, but certainly more complicated than her current position 10 minutes from my house. "That's amazing," I said, meaning it despite my mixed feelings. You'd be incredible at that. She nodded, studying my face in the dim porch light. It would mean a commute or relocation. When would you start? 3 months. They need to finish the new trauma wing. She hesitated. I wanted to tell you right away. No secrets. The implied comparison to Sarah hung unspoken between us. Lauren knew enough of my history to understand the value I placed on transparency, on having all facts before making decisions. I appreciate that, I said, pulling her closer against the night chill. We'll figure it out. Your dream job matters. She relaxed against me, the tension in her shoulders easing. Lots of army officers have relationships with Denver commutes. Rodriguez's wife works there, doesn't she? She does. They make it work. I kissed the top of her head. So will we, if that's what we decide. Lauren looked up at me, her expression serious. Is that what you want, to keep building this? The question was fair. We'd been careful with each other, taking small steps, neither rushing nor holding back. But we hadn't explicitly discussed long-term plans. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the lack of hesitation. I want to see where this goes. I'm not afraid of that anymore. Her smile was worth any uncertainty that might have lingered in my mind. Good, because I'm kind of crazy about you, Major Bennett. The feeling is entirely mutual, Nurse Richards. The next morning I woke to the sound of Lauren's soft breathing beside me, light filtered through curtains I'd chosen, illuminating a room that had once been the site of betrayal, but now held newer, better memories. On the nightstand, my grandfather's watch kept steady time, a reminder of the resilience encoded in my DNA. Careful not to wake her, I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen to start coffee. Through the window, I could see my oak sapling. No, longer accurately described as tiny, having grown impressively over the past year. Beside it, the vegetable garden I'd planted was yielding its fall harvest of squash and late tomatoes. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Hearing set for Prescott case. Prosecutor says your presence not required, but available if you want. Closure, deck 15, 10 a.m. I considered the offer as I measured coffee grounds. Did I need that kind of closure? To sit in a courtroom and watch Todd Prescott face consequences for his part in the conspiracy to defraud me? Sarah wouldn't be there. Her cooperation had earned her immunity from prosecution, according to Pearson's last update. She'd moved to Minnesota, taking a teaching position at a community college, starting fresh where no one knew her history. Everything okay? Lauren asked, appearing in the doorway in one of my army t-shirts, her hair tousled from sleep. Just a text about the Prescott case. Court date's been set. She nodded, understanding the significance without needing elaboration. One of the things I appreciated most about Lauren was her ability to recognize the weight of a moment without requiring me to explain or justify my emotions about it. Are you going to attend? She asked, accepting the coffee mug I offered. I don't think so. That chapter's closed for me. I leaned against the counter. I've been thinking more about the future than the past lately. Any particular future? Plans on your mind? Her tone was light, but her eyes held mine steadily. A few. Some involving career paths after my current assignment ends. Some involving this house and potential improvements. I smiled. Some involving a certain pediatric nurse and how to navigate a Denver commute. Lauren set down her coffee and stepped closer. I like those categories of plans, especially the last one. I thought you might. I pulled her into a gentle embrace. I was thinking we could drive up to Denver this weekend, check out the neighborhoods near the hospital, get a feel for the area. She looked up, surprised. You'd consider moving to Denver? I'd consider all the options. The base is actually closer to Denver than Colorado Springs proper. Might actually shorten my commute. I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Besides, Home isn't about the location, it's about who you're with. Her kiss told me everything I needed to know about her response to that sentiment. Later that morning, as Lauren left for her shift, I called James to decline the court hearing. Invitation. I don't need to see it happen, I explained. Knowing justice is being served is enough. I respect that, he said, moving forward rather than looking back. Speaking of moving forward, I might be exploring real estate options in Denver. James let out a low whistle. Things with Lauren must be getting serious. They are, I admitted, in a good way, a healthy way. I'm happy for you, Mike. After everything that happened, you deserve this. After hanging up, I went to the backyard to check on my growing oak. The sapling had more than doubled in height over the past year, its slender trunk gaining strength with each passing month. Beside it, Mrs. Calloway's matching tree was keeping pace, creating the symmetry she had envisioned when she planted it. I thought about what these trees would look like in 10 years, 20, 50, long after I was gone. The legacy of my grandfather continuing, not in the way I'd originally planned with Sarah, but in a new form that honored the past while embracing an unexpected future. My phone rang. Colonel Harrison, my commanding officer. Bennett, I answered. Major, how would you feel about heading to the Pentagon for a meeting next month? Joint Chiefs are organizing a task force on logistics modernization. Your name came up as someone with both combat experience and training expertise. The opportunity was significant, a chance to shape Army logistics on a national level, to implement ideas I'd been developing throughout my career. I'd be honored, sir. Good. Details forthcoming. This could lead to interesting opportunities, Bennett. Keep that in mind. As I ended the call, I realized how dramatically my professional trajectory had shifted since returning from deployment. The promotion to major, the training division leadership, and now this Pentagon invitation. Momentum building in a direction I hadn't anticipated, but welcomed. A year ago, I had been in Afghanistan receiving the devastating news of Sarah's betrayal. My personal and professional future suddenly uncertain. Now I stood in my backyard, career advancing, a promising new relationship developing, my home truly mine in every sense. That evening, I visited Mrs. Calloway to help her prepare her garden for the approaching winter. At 81, she still insisted on maintaining her award-winning flower beds, but had begrudgingly accepted occasional assistance with the heavier tasks. "Did I see Lauren's car here overnight?" she asked with the directness of someone who had long ago abandoned pretense. I laughed. "Yes, Mrs. Calloway, you did." "Good. She's a keeper, that one. Not just because she brings me baked goods, though that doesn't hurt." She handed me another bag of mulch. "You seem happy, Captain. Or should I say Major now?" "Major is correct, but Michael is fine." I spread the mulch around her prized rose bushes. "And yes, I am happy. Surprisingly so, given where I was this time last year." She nodded sagely. "Life has a way of balancing accounts eventually. Your ex-wife thought she was so clever, but look how things turned out. She lost everything, while you gained a fresh start, a promotion, and a woman worth 10 of her." "I don't think of it as karma," I said carefully. "More like the natural consequence of choices. Sarah chose deception and self-interest. I chose resilience and integrity. Our paths diverged accordingly." "Fancy words for the same thing?" Mrs. Calloway sniffed, "but I take your point." She surveyed her winterized garden with satisfaction. "The trees are doing well, both of them. My Harold always said you can tell a lot about a person by how they nurture living things." I glanced toward our matching oaks, standing as silent sentinels between our properties. "My grandfather said something similar. That patience with growing. Things translates to patience with people. Wise men, both of them." She patted my arm. "Now, would you like some lemonade? I made it fresh this morning." We sat on her porch, drinking lemonade as the afternoon light softened toward evening. From this vantage point, I could see my house, the new deck, the freshly painted trim, the repaired roof, physical manifestations of recovery and renewal. "I saw Sarah once, you know," Mrs. Calloway said suddenly, "about 2 months after she left. She came by when you were still deployed, trying to collect some jewelry she claimed was still in the house." This was news to me. What happened? I told her I'd called the police the moment I saw her car. Mrs. Calloway's expression hardened. She was not happy about that. "Did you really call the police?" A mischievous smile crossed her weathered face. "Of course not. But she didn't know that, did she? Drove away so fast she nearly hit my mailbox." She sipped her lemonade with satisfaction. "Sometimes a little protective deception is warranted." I laughed, imagining the scene. Tiny Mrs. Calloway facing down Sarah with nothing but bluster. And neighborhood loyalty, another debt I could never fully repay. When I returned home, there was a voicemail from Lauren. "Hey, just checking in, thinking about our Denver plans this weekend. Maybe we could look at apartments near the hospital, just to get ideas. Call me when you're free. Miss you." The suggestion should have triggered anxiety. Too soon, too fast, echoes of past mistakes. Instead, I felt a calm certainty. Lauren wasn't Sarah. Our relationship wasn't built on fantasy or obligation, but on mutual respect, honest communication, shared values. Moving too quickly wasn't our issue. Artificial hesitation based on past experiences would be the greater mistake. I called her back immediately. "Apartment hunting sounds perfect. And dinner at that place you mentioned near the hospital." "Really?" Her surprise was evident. "I thought you might think it was rushing things." "I'm done letting the past dictate my future," I said simply. "We'll take the right steps at the right time for us, not based on anyone else's timeline." That night, I dreamed of oak trees, not just the saplings in our yards, but massive, mature oaks with branches stretching toward the sky, roots deep in the earth, weathering storms and seasons with equal resolve. In the dream, I stood between them with Lauren, watching children, our children playing in their shade. I woke feeling rested and clear-headed, the dream lingering not as a source of pressure, but as a vision of possibility. The future contained infinite potential paths, none predetermined, all available for exploration. My phone buzzed with a morning text from James. "Finalize the trust updates you requested. Ready for signatures when you are." Another piece of resolution falling into place, updating my grandfather's trust to remove any possibility of Sarah accessing it, while adding provisions for future beneficiaries. Not specific names yet, but openings for a family I might one day build. As I prepared for work, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Major Michael Bennett looked back at me, the same man who had deployed to Afghanistan a year ago and yet fundamentally changed. The eyes that had once held confusion and betrayal now showed clarity and purpose. The posture that had been defensively straight now carried natural confidence. In the military, we have a concept called force multipliers, factors that dramatically increase the effectiveness of a combat unit beyond its basic capabilities. James had been my personal force multiplier during the darkest period of my life, anticipating threats, strengthening defenses, preserving what mattered most. But the ultimate force multiplier had been something within me, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed until circumstances demanded it. The capacity to lose what I thought was essential and discover I could not only survive but thrive in its absence. As I straightened my uniform and prepared to face the day, I realized that Sarah's betrayal, painful as it had been, had ultimately revealed rather than destroyed the foundation of my life. Like a building after an earthquake, the solid parts remained standing while the faulty sections collapsed. On my way out, I paused to water the oak sapling, now tall enough to require a supporting stake. "Keep growing," I told it quietly. "The best is yet to come." Up next, you've got 2 more. Standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.